So, today we're diving into a really powerful story. It's from a Nigerian Christian film that puts you right at the intersection of profound faith, deep love, and just unchangeable biology. And it forces you to ask some incredibly tough questions.
At its heart, this is a story about two different couples, and both of them believe they have everything figured out. They're in love, they're planning their futures, they have what they think is the perfect plan for the rest of their lives.
But that perfect plan, it gets completely shattered by a single piece of paper. A routine medical test that gives both of these couples the exact same, totally life-altering problem.
And that's really the core conflict here. It forces them and us to ask a fundamental question. When your love story hits a biological wall, what do? Do you try to knock it down with faith, or do you have to find a different path? All right, so let's meet our first couple, Joseph and Irene. They are the absolute picture of happiness. And they are planning a wedding that seems like it's straight out of a fairy tale. And when I say meticulous, I mean meticulous. The venue's locked in. The menu is booked for 500 people. They've got planners, a live band. They're even doing both the traditional and the white wedding on the same weekend. This isn't just a party. It's the launch of a life they've mapped out to perfection.
Now, as part of their church's premarital counseling, they have to do a series of medical tests. Totally standard stuff. It's a box to check, something they probably didn't give a second thought to. But this one routine test is about to completely derail their entire future.
So the results come in. Joseph is genotype AS, which he already knew. But Irene, who has been told her entire life that she was AA, discovers she's also AS. They're in complete disbelief, so much so that they go to 3 more hospitals, and every single test confirms it. The exact same devastating result. So what does this actually mean? Well, this one test result throws their entire dream for a family into question. It's a medical and an emotional dilemma that hangs over everything. Okay, so let's break down the biology here really quick. Having a genotype of AS means you carry the sickle cell trait. On your own, you're perfectly healthy, but you carry one normal A gene and one sickle S gene. The problem starts when 2 people who are both AS decide to have kids. This is the genetic roll of the dice for every single child they could have. There's a 25% chance of having a completely healthy AA child, a 50% chance of a child who's a carrier, AS, just like them, and then there's the last 25%, a 1 in 4 chance of having an SS child with full-blown sickle cell disease, which is a painful, lifelong condition. And the reality of that 25% chance is laid out for them in really stark terms by their doctor. He tells them, look, raising a child with this disease is emotionally draining. It's financially draining. It takes a massive toll on the entire family. It's a life of crisis after crisis.
And this is where the story gets really interesting, because we're about to see 2 couples face this exact same daunting situation. But the way they respond, the choices they make, could not be more different.
Irene is just completely heartbroken, right? But her friend gives her this piece of advice, and it's so profound. It's better to close a wound early than let it fester. This idea that taking the pain now is better than a lifetime of multiplied pain, that becomes her guide.
So they make an absolutely agonizing choice. They cancel the 500-guest wedding, they undo all those perfect plans, and they end their relationship. They choose the immediate, brutal heartbreak of separating to prevent the potential for a lifetime of suffering for a child they might have.
So, time passes. Joseph meets a new woman, Mary. And this is where the contrast just becomes so sharp. His relationship with Irene was all about pragmatism, wisdom, avoiding suffering. This new one? It's built on faith and a belief in miracles. And when they find out that they too are both AS, Joseph decides this time he's taking a different road. Yeah, Joseph and Mary decide to face this biological fact, not by backing down, but by doubling down on a relentless, unwavering faith. They genuinely believe that God can and will step in. And their journey is this series of escalating acts of faith. Joseph convinces Mary that their meeting was no accident, it was God's plan. They start these intense periods of prayer and fasting, first for 3 days, then a 7-day dry fast. Then their hope gets a huge boost when they meet another AS couple who had 3 perfectly healthy kids. And finally, they seal the deal with a prayer of agreement from their pastor. They are all in. Which, brings us to the question they are literally staking their entire future on. Can faith actually change a medical fact? Can belief rewrite your genetic code? But the story's climax, the answer they're so desperately seeking, doesn't come from a dramatic test result. It comes from a series of tragic, spiritual events that force them to really question what God's will is, especially when he seems to be silent. And it all happens so fast. A young woman with sickle cell they'd been helping, Alusa, she tragically dies. And the reality of the disease just hits them like a ton of bricks. Then, that very same night, both Joseph and Mary have the same terrifying nightmare. In his grief and confusion, Joseph just cries out to God, why are you so silent? And this time, he gets an answer. In this incredibly powerful vision, God tells him this: I am God, not a formula. The message is just profound. God is saying, my work isn't a template you can just copy and paste. A miracle for one person isn't a promise for everyone. He explains that faith can look like two different things: trusting for a miracle or trusting through a process. And both are valid forms of faith.
And after that revelation, everything suddenly makes sense to them. They understand the nightmares, the vision. It wasn't a test to see if they'd push harder for a miracle. It was guidance to let go. They realized that their path of faith was the path of trusting the process, of trusting the wisdom they had from the start. And so they choose to end their relationship. Which leaves us with the film's central, incredibly thought-provoking question. In the face of impossible circumstances, what does true faith actually look like? Is it demanding a miracle against all odds? Or is it finding the strength to trust the difficult, painful wisdom that's right there in front of you?